This module is important because effective positioning is essential to business success. In this module, we'll cover 4 learning objectives: the goals behind segmentation, targeting, and positioning, also known as STP, how companies position and reposition themselves and markets, the tools available to marketing analysts for positioning, and how to execute positioning using perceptual maps. We start this module by reviewing the concepts and goals behind segmentation, targeting, and positioning, also known as STP. In segmentation, we subdivide the large general market into distinct market segments. The different segments have different needs, so marketers need to deliver different messages to each segment. One advantage behind segmentation is increased customer satisfaction, because we can target more specific needs with the individual market segments than with the general market. Another advantage is increased marketing effectiveness, because we can deliver specific messages to which the segment will relate. In targeting, we select which market segments we wish to emphasize in our organization. We cannot target every possible segment, so we select a handful of segments it makes the most sense for us to service. In positioning, we develop messaging, pricing, distribution, and other elements to make consumers perceive that our brand occupies a distinct and favorable position relative to competing brands. We'll be focusing on positioning in this module. STP features a number of advantages. First, it has what's known in the military as concentration of force. We can focus our core competencies on relevant market segments rather than dilute them over the general market. For example, Starbucks Coffee focuses on coffee aficionados who appreciate and are willing to pay for premium coffee. They don't waste their time trying to be everything to everybody. Second, we can increase customer satisfaction because consumers get what they want. Third, we can leverage our competitive advantage to market segments which appreciate it. For example, rental car company Hertz has a competitive advantage of retail outlets in virtually every major airport, so it focuses on the frequent traveler market segment. On the other hand, Enterprise has a competitive advantage of many non-airport locations, so it targets local rentals such as people whose cars are under repair. Fourth, we can employ niche marketing, targeting specific segments with specific needs. For example, we can target this specific segment of people who need to get their Apple iPhone screen repaired. And fifth, we can generate higher profitability because we can target specific people willing to pay more for unique products and services fulfilling their exact needs. In their book Positioning, authors Rees and Trout emphasize the importance of positioning brands in the mind of the prospect. For example, when a person thinks of adhesive bandages, they often think of the Band-Aid brand, thanks to effective positioning efforts by their parent brand, Johnson & Johnson. Similarly, many people think of Kleenex for facial tissue and FedEx for overnight shipping. Different rental car companies emphasize different positioning approaches, each targeting a different market segment. Hertz targets frequent business travelers by offering its rental cars in many airports. Enterprise targets consumers with auto repairs and other temporary auto needs by offering its rental cars in city centers. Thrifty targets relocated employees with its multi-month rental program. Budget targets price-conscious renters by offering rentals at a discount. And Exotic Dream Cars targets exotic car aficionados with its Ferraris and other supercars. Positioning is not static. From time to time, we may need to change our positioning to address current conditions. For example, office supply store Staples initiated the concept of the big box office supply store. Because their stores had significant numbers of items, they positioned themselves around selection with their messaging, "Yeah, we've got that." But then OfficeMax, Office Depot, and other competitors joined the industry. Staples could no longer claim a unique position on selection because the other big box stores stocked similar, if not identical, items. In order to keep relevant to shoppers' needs, Staples repositioned itself around convenience using the message that was easy. The perceptual map is a graphical tool to understand consumers' perceptions of companies selling similar products and services to the same market. Here we see a sample perceptual map for household blenders at about the $40 to $60 price point, according to test data from a major consumer review magazine. To construct such a map, the magazine ran a survey of sample consumers, asking for their perceptions of different household blenders. In this case, the magazine found that consumers evaluated blenders by comparing effective power and feature richness between competing models. We then plot the results of the survey using power and feature richness as the axes. We divide the map into 4 quadrants. In the upper left quadrant, we see several competitors positioned fairly close to each other. In the quadrant, we see that KitchenAid and Black & Decker are near each other. We interpret that observation by saying that consumers perceived those brands as very similar to each other. On the other hand, consumers perceived the Cuisinart brand, located in the lower right quadrant, as significantly different from both the KitchenAid and Black & Decker models. In the second lecture in this model, we'll cover how to develop a perceptual map just like this one. Perceptual mapping has several applications. First, we can identify clusters of people, also known as market segments, of potential customers with similar needs. For example, we might find that fine chefs appreciate the feature richness of the Cuisinart brand, so we call those people the chef cluster. Second, we can assess our competition by noting the differences between us and our competitors. Third, we can identify new opportunities by looking for blank spaces in the perceptual map. However, we must proceed with caution. The blank spaces might signal an opportunity others have missed, or it might signify an area unwanted by consumers. Fourth, perceptual maps serve as effective communications vehicles with company executives because it graphically shows how consumers perceive the company relative to its competitors. And fifth, we can conduct periodic surveys to understand consumer perceptions over time, alerting us to changes requiring repositioning, such as the Staples example we discussed earlier. We end this module by covering different categories of mapping methods. We show 3 basic types: perceptual maps, preference maps, and joint space maps. Perceptual maps show consumer perception, as we saw in the household blender example. Preference map indicate consumer preference, designating not just what consumers perceive, but what they say they actually want. Joint space maps combine elements of perceptual maps and preference maps along with other data. We discuss each type. Perceptual maps are divided into attribute-based and similarity-based types. Attribute-based perceptual maps are based on tangible descriptors, such as effective power, features, weight, and so forth. Sometimes we run into situations such as fashion, food, perfumes, and luxury goods where attributes are not relevant. For example, should we judge the quality of couture clothing based on its weight? In such cases, we employed similarity-based perceptual maps, which compare how similar consumers find one value versus another. Preference maps show what consumers actually want. Such maps are divided into ideal point types and vector model types. Ideal point types show a most preferred point, such as a most preferred level of spiciness in food, striking a balance between too bland and too spicy. Such maps are sometimes used in food and beverage studies. Vector model types add a preference vector for attributes that most people want, such as performance, reliability, and convenience. This course emphasizes perceptual maps over preference maps because we want to emphasize that different segments have different preferences, whereas preference maps strive to show the one true preference. Joint space maps combine multiple features in one view. We can ask consumers for their perceptions and preferences and plot them on one map. In such a map, we can include a preference vector for the ideal choice. We can also use external analysis methods where we include the results of external analysis in our maps. For example, we can include circles on the map whose size indicates the degree of importance of certain attributes. In such instances, we can interpret the size of the circle as potential market share. In the next lecture, we discuss how to actually develop perceptual maps step by step.